A new manager at a company ruthlessly pushed an elderly worker, causing him to fall to his knees on the sidewalk. But later, the manager would discover something that would leave him trembling. The newly appointed manager, cold as ice, heartlessly fired the elderly employee who had worked at the company since its inception. Without showing the slightest hint of compassion, the ruthless manager shoved him towards the exit while the old man's desperate pleas echoed through the lobby. "Please, sir, I've dedicated my life to this company," the old man cried, tears welling in his eyes. "I ask for just a little compassion." "Compassion?" the manager sneered. "Don't make me laugh. Your years here no longer matter. You're just a burden now." With every shove, the elderly man lost a piece of his dignity, while the belongings he had accumulated over decades of service scattered across the floor, silent witnesses to the cruelty of the moment. The final blow came on the sidewalk, where the elderly man, with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, gathered his few remaining possessions under the mocking gaze of the manager. "Look at you, old and useless," the manager jeered, his face twisted into a malicious grin. "I told you this day would come." With a broken voice, the old man murmured, "I never thought it would end like this after everything I've done." The cruel manager savored every second of the humiliation, but what he was about to find among the old man's belongings would leave the entire workforce stunned, and perhaps devastate even him. This is the story of Carlos, a hard-working man who devoted his entire life to a company that repaid him in the worst possible way, discarding him when he was no longer useful. Carlos was an elderly man who had worked tirelessly alongside his colleagues from a very young age, helping to build the fabric company into the thriving business it had become. His dedication was unparalleled, and he was beloved by all. There wasn't a single function within the company that he didn't know inside out, as he was always actively involved in every area, from fabric production to the final packaging of the products. He was a constant presence, a paternal figure who offered wisdom and support to his co-workers. On the other hand, the company had always been managed by a distant, authoritarian figure, a manager who rarely interacted with employees except to issue orders. Yet, despite his cold demeanor, everyone knew that the real owner of the company had never set foot in the factory. Even the longest-serving employees had never met the mysterious owner. This mystery became a frequent topic of speculation and gossip among the workers during their breaks. Despite the owner's absence, the company thrived, and many credited that success to Carlos' tireless work. He didn't just complete his assigned tasks. He went above and beyond, solving problems, training new employees, and ensuring that every detail was perfect. His experience and dedication made him an indispensable part of the company's operations. However, the general manager, Mr. Sebastian, had always been a kind and considerate leader who paid close attention to his employees' needs. Sebastian had been running the company for many years and knew Carlos very well. Carlos had great ideas, and Sebastian often sought his advice on upcoming business ventures. Carlos had a remarkable vision for new acquisitions, something that Sebastian deeply admired. Together, they planned new strategies, and on one occasion, Carlos saved the company from a potential disaster. This act of insight and loyalty led Sebastian to fully trust Carlos, and from that moment on, they formed a deep friendship. Sebastian didn't just value Carlos as an employee, but also as a friend. At a barbecue at Sebastian's house, the laughter and conversation flowed freely. "Carlos, do you remember that investment proposal we almost accepted?" Sebastian asked as he grilled some meat. "How could I forget?" Carlos replied, laughing. "Good thing we double-checked those details before making a decision." "My wife still thanks me for avoiding that disaster," Sebastian said, gesturing to his wife Laura, who was chatting with Carlos' wife, Anna, by the pool. "It was teamwork," Carlos said, raising his glass. "Here's to many more wise decisions to come." "To good health," replied Sebastian, raising his glass in a toast with Carlos. The children ran around the garden, laughing and playing, while their wives sat nearby, deep in conversation and laughter. The friendship between Carlos and Sebastian extended beyond their professional relationship, creating a bond between their families as well. It was more than just business. It was a true community. "I've always valued your advice and friendship, Sebastian," Carlos said, looking at his friend with genuine appreciation. "We didn't just build a solid company," replied Sebastian with a warm smile. "We built a real community, and that's something I'm incredibly proud of. Having you and your family close has been one of the best decisions of my life," Sebastian added, his voice filled with sincerity. The afternoon continued with stories, laughter, and plans for the future, reinforcing a friendship that, without a doubt, would only grow stronger over time. As the years passed, Sebastian, now advanced in age, fell ill. With a heavy heart, he decided to step down as manager to live a quieter life with his wife. This significant event led the mysterious owner of the company to appoint a new representative. The new hire was a younger man, full of energy and ambition, eager to lead the company into a new, modernized era of higher profits and efficiency. His name was Lorenzo, and from the moment he set foot in the company, it was clear he had an air of superiority. Lorenzo gave orders with disdain, showing no empathy for his employees. He didn't believe there was any valid excuse for being late or missing work, regardless of circumstances. His first days at the company were a shock for the employees, who had grown accustomed to Sebastian's kind and understanding leadership. "I want the sales reports on my desk by 8 a.m. sharp," Lorenzo demanded, not even bothering to make eye contact with the employees. "But sir, some of the data hasn't been fully compiled yet," Carlos tried to explain. "I don't want excuses," Lorenzo interrupted coldly. "If you can't handle something so simple, maybe you shouldn't be here." The atmosphere in the company quickly became tense. The employees, once valued and respected, now worked under a cloud of fear and anxiety. The camaraderie that Sebastian had nurtured for years began to fade under Lorenzo's harsh rule. One day, after a particularly difficult workday, Carlos found himself reflecting on the drastic changes in the company. He remembered Sebastian's wise words, always full of care. "Carlos, never forget that the people are the real driving force of this company. Without them, we are nothing." Determined to honor Sebastian's legacy, Carlos gathered a small group of trusted colleagues and proposed a meeting after hours. "We can't let this new manager destroy everything we worked so hard to build," Carlos said with resolve. "We have to find a way to adapt while keeping alive the values Sebastian taught us." Unfortunately, many employees began to quit due to Lorenzo's mistreatment, and the company's profits took a steep decline. Lorenzo, it turned out, was also siphoning money from the company's main account, spending it on extravagant parties with friends, lavish gifts for his mistresses, and luxurious trips. His irresponsible and wasteful behavior soon began to affect the company's financial stability. The remaining employees, who had once felt valued under Sebastian's leadership, were now demoralized and stressed. The work environment had become unbearable. Lorenzo's negligence didn't stop there. He frequently arrived late or missed work altogether, and when he did show up, his attitude was authoritarian and abusive. This was especially hard on Carlos, who, now the oldest employee, couldn't complete his tasks as quickly as he once had. Despite his slower pace, Carlos always met the company's goals, which made it difficult for Lorenzo to justify firing him. As time passed, Lorenzo made a point of assigning Carlos increasingly difficult tasks, seemingly with the intent of breaking the old man's spirit. Noticing the hostile treatment, the other employees rallied in solidarity with Carlos. They helped him lift heavy objects, operated complicated machinery for him, and even assisted with fabric cutting. Each person contributed in some way to ensure that Carlos could continue his work without putting his health at risk. No one wanted to see the elderly man, who had become like a grandfather to many of them, lose his job due to the cruelty of a man who seemed to take pleasure in his suffering. The kindness and teamwork among the workers made Carlos feel supported and valued, despite the daily challenges he faced. Lorenzo, realizing that he couldn't fire Carlos based on his performance, came up with another plan. One day, Lorenzo announced a small office celebration to honor Mr. Carlos for his 30 years of service to the company. However, hidden beneath this gesture of recognition was a sinister intention. Lorenzo decided to throw a grand farewell party, purchasing a large cake and several appetizers. As everyone ate and drank, he made a sudden announcement. In his speech, Lorenzo expressed gratitude for Carlos's years of hard work, but then dropped a bombshell. That afternoon would be Carlos's last day as an employee because he was being retired. The older man, who had been listening attentively, was stunned by the unexpected news. After snapping out of his shock, Carlos stood up, his voice steady but firm. "I'm not retiring, Lorenzo. I love my work and I don't plan on leaving as long as I still have strength in my body." Lorenzo's face changed instantly. The fake smile he had worn during the announcement disappeared, replaced by a look of pure rage. In a fit of anger, Lorenzo grabbed his glass and smashed it on the floor, the shards scattering across the room. "You're nothing but a leech who took advantage of the previous manager's naivety," he shouted. "But that's over now." The office fell into a tense silence. The sound of glass crunching beneath the feet of the startled employees, the only noise breaking the stillness. The workers, who had moments earlier been enjoying the celebration, now looked on with worry and disbelief. Carlos, heart pounding and hands trembling, maintained his composure. "You have no right to speak to me like that," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I've given 30 years of my life to this company, with pride and dedication. You can't just decide my future without consulting me." "I'm the manager now," Lorenzo snarled, his face flushed with anger. "I'll do what I think is best for this company. And you, old man, don't belong here anymore. It's time to step aside and let younger, more capable people take over." With that, Lorenzo stormed over to Carlos's cubicle, grabbed his few personal belongings, and stuffed them into a garbage bag with a look of disdain. He then called for security and ordered them to escort Carlos out of the building. Carlos, stunned and unable to fully comprehend the brutality of the moment, was dragged outside. As he stumbled out the door, he tripped and fell to his knees on the sidewalk. His meager possessions were carelessly thrown beside him as if they were worthless. Passers-by watched with a mix of shock and sympathy as the elderly man, with trembling hands, tried to gather his things. His eyes, filled with sadness and humiliation, mirrored the cruelty of the situation. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, smirking. "Don't ever come back," he said coldly, slamming the door. "You're a weak old man, and we have no use for you anymore." The manager's words hung in the air, dripping with contempt and disdain. Carlos remained kneeling on the pavement, struggling to regain his composure as tears welled up in his eyes. That afternoon, as he walked away from the building, his spirit was as broken as his body. Every step was painful, not just from the physical fall, but from the emotional blow he had suffered. When Carlos finally returned home that night, he told his wife, Anna, what had happened. Outraged by the cruelty of the new manager, Anna exclaimed, "This is unacceptable, Carlos. We have to speak with Sebastian. He's always been fair, and he'll know what to do. We need to inform the owners about what's happening." Carlos, deeply concerned for his old friend's health, shook his head. "I don't want to bother Sebastian, Anna. You know he's very sick. I don't want to burden him with this." Still furious, Anna tried to persuade him. "Sebastian has always cared about all of you. I'm sure he'd want to know what's going on. We can't let this man destroy everything he built." Despite Carlos's wishes, Anna decided to take action. Without wasting any time, she contacted Laura, Sebastian's wife, seeking support. Laura, who had witnessed her husband's hard work in building the company, listened carefully as Anna recounted the events. "This can't go on," Anna said, desperate. "Lorenzo is destroying everything Sebastian worked for. The employees are being mistreated, and Lorenzo is stealing money from the company. We can't just stand by." Visibly shaken by the news, Laura responded with determination. "You're right, Anna. This cannot continue. I'll speak to Sebastian, and we'll figure out what to do. I won't let my husband's legacy be destroyed by someone like that." Although she was worried about Sebastian's health, Laura knew the severity of the situation. When she told him, Sebastian, though weak, was outraged and resolved to act. "I can't let this go on, Laura," he said, his voice frail but determined. "I'm going to contact the owners and tell them everything. I won't let my work and the well-being of my former employees be destroyed." With Laura and Anna's help, Sebastian drafted a detailed letter outlining Lorenzo's abuses and financial mismanagement. The letter was sent to the company's owners, who, alarmed by the seriousness of the accusations, decided to take immediate action. The next morning, Lorenzo arrived at his office to find a woman surrounded by uniformed men packing his belongings into boxes. Outraged by what he saw, he stormed over and demanded, "Who do you think you are, touching my things without permission?" The woman calmly approached him and said firmly, "I'm the lawyer representing the owner of this company, and you're being investigated for the alleged embezzlement of thousands of dollars." Stunned and furious, Lorenzo tried to defend himself, but at that moment, Carlos entered the office. However, the man standing before Lorenzo was no longer the elderly worker in his worn-out clothes. This time, Carlos was dressed in an elegant, expensive suit, his presence commanding and full of authority. With an imposing stance and a stern gaze, the older man made it clear that things were not as Lorenzo had assumed. The tension in the room thickened, adding an air of mystery to the unfolding situation. Upon seeing him, Lorenzo exploded in anger, attempting once again to have the man thrown out of the premises. But one of the security guards quickly stepped in and blocked his path. The older man, calm and composed despite the charged atmosphere, approached slowly and began to speak in a voice both serene and resolute. "You have no right to be here," Lorenzo shouted, his eyes blazing with fury. "Who do you think you are?" The older man looked at him, his expression a mixture of sadness and disappointment, before responding. "I'm the one who has been at the helm of this company since my dear friend Sebastian retired," he said, his tone firm but measured. "For years, I worked side by side with our employees, driving this business forward like any other worker, ensuring that everything ran smoothly." Lorenzo stood there, stunned, speechless for the first time. The man continued, his voice steady and unwavering. "I watched this company prosper thanks to the collective efforts of everyone here. However, as I grew older, I realized it was time for me to step back and let someone else take the reins. That's why I hired you, believing you could continue the work we started." "You hired me?" Lorenzo interrupted, his voice filled with disbelief and disdain. "You don't need to supervise me. I'm the manager. I don't answer to anyone." The older man nodded slowly. "Yes, I hired a new manager, with the intention of overseeing him discreetly to ensure the company's legacy was preserved. But I made a grave mistake. I hired someone as arrogant as you. Someone who not only neglected the well-being of our workers, but also spent months stealing from the company." Lorenzo's face flushed even deeper with a mix of anger and shame. "That's a lie," he yelled, his voice quivering with fury. "You have no proof." Without a word, the older man reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Lorenzo, who snatched it with a trembling hand. "Here is all the proof you need," the older man said calmly. "Documents, records, employee testimonies. It's all in here. I didn't make this decision lightly." Lorenzo's hand shook as he gripped the envelope, his rage bubbling over. "This isn't over," he shouted, breaking the tense silence that had settled over the room. The older man, unflinching, looked at him with unshakable calm. "You're wrong," he said softly but firmly. "This is over. You haven't just failed this company. You've betrayed every person who placed their trust in you. Now, you'll have to face the consequences of your actions." Without another word, Lorenzo dropped the envelope and stormed out of the room, his tense figure disappearing through the door. The older man turned to the security team and calmly instructed them, "Don't let him leave. The police are on their way." He then faced the employees who had witnessed the entire scene, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. With a tired but reassuring smile, he said, "Let's get back to work, everyone. There's still a lot to do, and the company needs us now more than ever." The employees, some with tears in their eyes, nodded and slowly returned to their stations. The older man, despite the heavy burden of the situation, walked with determination, ready to continue for the sake of the business he had helped build with so much effort. Meanwhile, Lorenzo, unable to find words or fight back, was soon handcuffed and escorted out of the building by the police. The scene unfolded before the eyes of the entire staff, leaving a lasting mark on their memories. Within weeks, the charges of embezzlement and fraud were proven true, and Lorenzo was sentenced to a long prison term, where he had plenty of time to reflect on his actions and their consequences. With the corrupt manager out of the picture, Carlos stepped back into the leadership role, his spirit reinvigorated by the challenge ahead. His old friend Sebastian, who had held the position for many years before, retirement played a crucial role in that process. Thanks to Sebastian's wise counsel and shared experience, Carlos was able to navigate the crisis that had previously gripped the company. Under his leadership, the business quickly regained the trust of both its clients and employees. Known for his unwavering integrity and deep commitment, Carlos earned the respect and affection of everyone who worked with him. Despite his position at the helm, he never stopped working alongside his team. He was often seen on the factory floor, supervising processes, chatting with employees, and actively participating in the daily tasks. His constant presence, along with his willingness to listen and offer help, fostered a positive and welcoming work environment. Employees greatly valued Carlos's humility and dedication, knowing they could always rely on him. This mutual trust resulted in exceptional productivity and loyalty across the workforce. Under his leadership, not only did the company regain its financial footing, but it also experienced significant growth. Carlos worked tirelessly until his final days, never fully stepping away from the business. He always found ways to contribute and support his team, ensuring the company's continued success. His legacy extended far beyond his lifetime, as the business he helped build continued to thrive, inspired by the values and work ethic he embodied. The story of his friendship with Sebastian and the wisdom he received became a lasting example of leadership and dedication, remembered and celebrated by future generations. Remember, the position we hold means nothing if we don't grow as individuals. The true measure of success isn't in the titles or ranks we achieve, but in how we treat others and how we evolve as human beings. The best way to succeed in all aspects of life is through humility and treating those around us with kindness. It's easy to forget that behind every achievement are people who support us and help us grow. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us once again in this story filled with lessons and reflections. Did you enjoy the story? Our channel appreciates your company. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time,